November 13th, there was some online searches done. What were those searches for?
We learned through our analysis that John Skelton's laptop was used to conduct online searches. Part of the searches included a search for potassium cyanide. The availability of prussic acid. Is rat poison tasteless and odorless? Can rat poison kill a person? Is it odorless and tasteless? Those were the search terms.
On the morning of November 26, 2010, Tanya Zuvers drove to her ex-husband's house in Morenci, Michigan to pick up her 3 sons. Andrew was 9. He wore brown pajamas with orange trim. Alex was 7. He wore glasses and a gray shirt. Tanner was 5. He wore a Scooby-Doo shirt and camouflage pajamas. They had spent Thanksgiving with their father. They were supposed to come home. They were not there. Their father was not there. The house was. And what was inside that house? The severed cords, the shredded mattress, the rope hanging from the stairwell banister, told a story that John Skelton has spent the next 15 years refusing to finish. 15 years of lies, a murder charge, a courtroom, and in 7 days, a preliminary hearing that may finally force him to answer for what he did. Stay with me, because this story matters. To understand this story, you first need to understand the world these 3 boys lived in. Morenci, Michigan is a small city of just over 2,000 people, the kind of place where everyone knows the name of the family that runs the hardware store, where kids ride bikes on November afternoons before the cold fully sets in, where Thanksgiving smells like it is supposed to smell, like warmth inside 4 walls, like something good on a stove. Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton were, by every account, ordinary little boys. Andrew was the oldest, 9 years old enough to look after his brothers, young enough to still need looking after himself. Alex was 7, already wearing glasses, already a kid who needed the world a little sharper than it appeared to him. Tanner was 5, strawberry blonde hair, blue eyes, a Scooby-Doo shirt on Thanksgiving because when you are 5, you wear what makes you happy. Their parents, John and Tanya, had married in 2002. It was the second marriage for both of them. By 2010, the marriage was over. Tanya had filed for divorce in September of that year and had been granted sole custody. On the same day she filed, John signed the older boys out of school without her knowledge and drove them to Florida. She obtained a court order and drove after him. The boys came home. But the marriage was finished, and the custody arrangement that followed was fragile and contentious from the start. The arrangement for Thanksgiving 2010 was simple. The boys would spend the holiday with their father at his home on East Congress Street. He would return them the following day. It was the kind of agreement that happens in thousands of divorced households across this country every single year. The difference in this case is that John Skelton had already decided what he was going to do. He had already been searching. He had already written the note. What he had not yet decided, or perhaps had already decided and chose never to tell anyone, was what he was going to do with 3 little boys who were present for what he had planned. The boys were last seen alive at around 2:30 in the afternoon on Thanksgiving Day, playing in their father's backyard. When Tanya arrived the following morning, the boys were not there. John was not there. She called his phone. No answer. She went to look for him. She found him in a hospital in Toledo, Ohio. He had attempted to take his own life by hanging from the banister at his home. He had broken his ankle in the fall. He was alive. His sons were not with him. Officers who entered the Morenci home found it in a state that one investigator would describe as disheveled, which is a word that does not fully communicate what they found. Broken glass, severed appliance cords, a shredded mattress, and from the stairwell banister, a rope, multiple toe straps, and a Bible left open to a circled verse. Let that sit for a moment. Not the rope of someone who had changed their mind, the rope of someone who had planned. Tanya reported the boys missing. An Amber Alert was issued for Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton. Law enforcement across Michigan and Ohio began searching. More than 500 volunteers would walk 80 square miles across parts of 2 states. John Skelton, recovering in a hospital bed in Toledo, began to talk. And what came out of his mouth over the next several weeks is one of the most extraordinary sequences of changing stories in the history of cold case investigation in this country. I want to take you through every single one, because the lies themselves are evidence, and the system's response to those lies, that is the part of this story that no one has fully decoded. Story 1. Joanne Taylor. While still hospitalized, John Skelton told investigators the following. He had given his boys to a woman named Joanne Taylor. He had met her online years earlier. She was married to a pastor. She lived somewhere in Jackson County or Hillsdale, Michigan. She drove a white or silver minivan. He had given the boys to her because he did not want them present when he killed himself. He said Joanne Taylor would return the boys to Tanya. Investigators searched extensively. They could find no Joanne Taylor, no pastor, no minivan, no record of contact between this person and John Skelton. Further investigation would later reveal that an email address supposedly belonging to Joanne Taylor appeared to have been created at John Skelton's own home based on the associated IP address. He had also used that name to communicate with Tanya on a parenting social media platform. Joanne Taylor was not a woman he had given his children to. Joanne Taylor was a character he had invented, and in some moments appeared to believe he was. I want you to notice something here. John Skelton did not say, I don't know where they are. He gave a specific name, a specific description, a specific location range. He constructed a person, a married woman, a pastor husband, a white minivan, a Michigan county, with enough detail that it took investigators meaningful time and resources to eliminate her. A former Morenci police chief later testified that an investigator was assigned specifically to finding Joanne Taylor. That level of construction does not come from a traumatized mind operating under grief. That is preparation. That is someone who anticipated being asked this question and had built an answer in advance. Story 1 collapsed, but it was not the last story. It was merely the first. When Story 1 collapsed, John Skelton produced Story 2. He told investigators the boys had been given to an underground group, a secret organization that would keep the children safe. He said the boys were still alive, but would not be returned as long as their mother retained sole custody. He also told investigators he was 95% sure the boys were in a dumpster in Holiday City, Ohio. He said he had a vision. Police searched dumpsters in the specified area. They found nothing. He also told investigators the boys might be wrapped in blankets in an old schoolhouse in Kunkel, Ohio. Police searched the schoolhouse. They found nothing. The vision is instructive, not because John Skelton is psychic. He is not. But because a vision serves a specific function. It sends law enforcement somewhere without committing him to a verifiable claim. It creates the appearance of a man who wants his children found, while providing information that cannot be confirmed and leads nowhere. Criminologists call this performative disclosure. The subject volunteers information. The information generates investigative activity. The activity finds nothing, and the subject can say, I told them everything I know. The dumpster search was the second time law enforcement deployed real resources based on John Skelton's testimony. It would not be the last. At a court hearing in December 2010, 1 month after the boys vanished, John Skelton changed his story again. This time he told the court the boys had been placed in the care of an organization called United Foster Outreach and Underground Sanctuaries. He described it as Amish-connected. He said they operated a network of safe houses for children in dangerous situations. Investigators researched the organization. It does not exist. No record, no registration, no members, no address, no history, nothing. Members of the actual Amish community, when contacted, told investigators plainly, even if children were in their care, they would not hide them from police or from their mother. 3 stories in 30 days. I want you to hold that number. In each version, John Skelton's sons are alive. In each version, they are safe. In each version, the reason they cannot be produced is someone else's fault. Tanya's custody arrangement, the underground group's rules, the organization's protocols. He is never the reason the boys cannot be found. He is always the victim of the reason. That is not the behavior of a man who gave his children to someone else. That is the behavior of a man who knows exactly where they are and is building stories specifically designed to keep everyone looking somewhere else. The stories did not stop when John Skelton entered prison. In 2018, 8 years after the boys disappeared, he told investigators he had given his sons to 2 women and a man in a light-colored van. He said they were taken to a farm along the Ohio-Indiana border. He named Mose Gingerich, a man who had appeared on the reality television series Amish in the City, as someone who could help bring the boys home. Investigators tracked down Mose Gingerich. Gingerich had never heard of the Skelton Brothers, but he agreed to go visit John Skelton in prison at Bellamy Creek Correctional Facility in Michigan, and when Gingerich sat across from him in that visiting room, something happened that Gingerich would later describe to reporters. John Skelton became visibly shaken, and then he did not ask Mose Gingerich a single question about his sons, not one. A man who had just told investigators that a man from a reality television program could locate his missing children sat across from that very man and did not ask him one question about bringing them home. Gingerich later told reporters, "John Skelton has told himself and the world so many lies and so many falsehoods over the last 7 years, he's come to believe most of them." That silence is the most revealing moment in 15 years of this case. Because if you genuinely believed that the person sitting across from you held the key to finding your children, you would ask, you would beg, you would not stop talking until you had every name, every address, every piece of information that person might have. John Skelton said nothing, because Mose Gingerich was never going to find those boys, because there were no women in a van, because there was no farm, because John Skelton already knew where they were. He named Gingerich for the same reason he named Joanne Taylor and the underground organization, not to find his sons, but to buy more time and appear cooperative while ensuring no one looked in the right place. 7 stories, 15 years, not one of them true.
While John Skelton built his stories, investigators were building something else: phone records. Cell phone data placed John Skelton's device in Morenci, Michigan, in the early hours of November 26, 2010. At approximately 4:30 in the morning, his phone began tracking southwest into Ohio. At 5:01 to 5:04 in the morning, it pinged a cell tower in Holiday City, Ohio, approximately 25 miles from his home. And then the phone went dark. It was switched off. It came back on at 6:45 in the morning. He was back in Morenci. His blue Dodge Caravan, Michigan license plate 9JQH93, was also captured on the Ohio Turnpike between 4:29 a.m. and 6:46 a.m. on the morning of November 26th. Detective Lieutenant Jeremy Brewer of the Michigan State Police later said, "Around 4:30 a.m., the phone started tracking from Morenci, going southwest into Ohio. Around 5:01 to 5:04 a.m. was the last time it pinged before being turned off, around 20 miles away from Morenci in Holiday City, Ohio. It turned back on at 6:45 a.m. back at his house in Morenci. I want you to do the math with me." He drove into Ohio in the early morning hours after Thanksgiving. He shut his phone off. He spent up to 76 minutes in or around Holiday City before driving back. And when investigators asked him what happened during that window, John Skelton, the man with a story for every occasion, had nothing. To this day, he has never explained the gap, not once, not in 15 years, not in 7 stories. And there is one more thing. Before the boys disappeared, John Skelton used his home computer to search 2 things: how to break a neck, whether rat poison was odorless. These searches occurred approximately 1 week before his sons vanished. And in a note left in the home, addressed to Tanya, he wrote, "You will hate me forever, and I know this." FBI Special Agent Corey Burris would later testify that this note was a passive admission to killing the children. He did not write, "I'm sorry I am leaving." He did not write, "Please take care of the boys." He wrote, "You will hate me forever, and I know this." That is a man confessing without confessing. That is a man who knows exactly what he has done, and is telling the person who will eventually understand that she will never forgive him for it. Before we go further, Andrew was 9, Alex was 7, Tanner was 5. If this story matters to you, if you believe these boys deserve to be remembered by more people than currently know their names, subscribe, not for the numbers, because every person who watches this is one more person who carries them forward. Let's continue.
In 2011, 8 months after 3 children disappeared, John Skelton entered a plea. Not murder, not kidnapping. He pleaded no contest to 3 counts of unlawful imprisonment. Under the plea deal, kidnapping charges, which carry a potential sentence of life in prison, were dismissed. He was sentenced to 10 to 15 years. I need you to understand what this means and what it does not mean. Unlawful imprisonment is the legal conclusion that he failed to return 3 children to their custodial parent. Not that he killed them, not that he concealed a crime, not that he destroyed evidence, not that he dispatched law enforcement to Ohio dumpsters and Amish safe houses and reality television stars while withholding the one piece of information that mattered. 10 to 15 years. The reason, and prosecutors were not wrong about this, is that no-body homicide cases carry an exceptionally high evidentiary burden. Building a murder conviction without remains requires establishing guilt beyond a reasonable doubt through circumstantial evidence alone, phone records, internet searches, behavioral inconsistencies, the collective improbability of every story offered. In 2011, prosecutors made a judgment call that they did not have enough for murder, so they took what they could prove, and John Skelton, who had searched how to break a neck, who had 76 unexplained minutes in Ohio, who had left a note saying, "You will hate me forever, and I know this," who had invented at least 7 separate people, organizations, and locations to explain where his children were, entered the prison system not as a convicted murderer, as a man who had failed to return his children. And the clock began to run.
For 15 years, Tanya Zoovers waited. She waited while John Skelton applied for parole and was denied multiple times. He skipped his parole hearing in 2021 altogether. He was ultimately denied release and served his full sentence, which ended November 29, 2025. She waited through 7 stories, a reality television appearance, a vision of a dumpster, and an underground organization that did not exist. She waited while age progression images were released by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, showing the boys as they might look at 15, 17, 20. Faces the world made up because no one could provide the real ones. She waited while the boys' case file stayed open, their remains unfound, their location known to exactly one person who had decided every single morning for 15 years that today was not the day he would tell the truth. And then, in March 2025, Lenawee County Judge Catherine Sala granted Tanya's petition to have her sons declared legally deceased. The judge issued the declaration, but was careful to note it did not constitute a finding that the boys had been murdered. Her words, "The information provided in this trial provides ample opportunity for speculation and theories, but to make such a finding, the court would only be joining those voices offering such speculation and theory given the lack of information. Andrew, Alex, Tanner, dead on paper, 15 years after they disappeared in pajamas the night after Thanksgiving. Tanya stood in that courtroom and said something I want you to hear. Their father showed them no respect. I shouldn't even say their father. John Skelton showed them no respect. She could not call him their father anymore, because a father does not do what John Skelton did." 6 months later, in November 2025, prosecutors filed new charges. John Skelton was arraigned just days before his scheduled release from prison, not false imprisonment. 3 counts of open murder, plus tampering with evidence. In Michigan, an open murder charge allows prosecutors to pursue any degree of homicide, including first degree, based on what the evidence at trial ultimately supports. It is a deliberate charging tool. It means the prosecution is not yet required to prove premeditation in the indictment. It means the full weight of what happened to Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton can be argued before a jury. Bond was set at $60 million. John Skelton, who had been days from walking out of prison, was not going anywhere. In December 2025, the preliminary hearing was scheduled for May 11th through 15th and May 18th through 20th. The judge noted there was an enormous amount of discovery in the case. A courtroom in Lenawee County, Michigan, and John Skelton will have to sit across from the evidence rather than above it. In the weeks before this video was published, something happened in Memphis, Tennessee. The Memphis Police Department announced the discovery of skeletal remains in a wooded area in the Hickory Hill neighborhood. The investigation had actually begun on March 8th, when a person walking their dog discovered a human skull. The remains are believed to belong to 3 young children, estimated to be between 3 and 7 years old. Officials believe the remains have been at the site for years. Memphis Police Chief Saralyn Davis said plainly, adults were involved in this terrible, tragic situation. Within hours, social media lit up. The comparison was immediate. 3 missing boys from Michigan, 3 sets of remains in Tennessee, ages that overlapped. Could it be Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner? Michigan State Police cold case investigators contacted the Memphis Police Department immediately. Michigan State Police Lieutenant Rene Gonzalez issued a statement. His words, "Based on our investigation and timeline of events, we do not believe the remains belong to Tanner, Alexander, and Andrew Skelton. We will work with Memphis officials to confirm this." MSP is providing DNA and dental records to Memphis investigators to formally eliminate the brothers as a match. The preliminary assessment is clear. The remains in Memphis are not believed to be the Skelton brothers. Tanya Zouvers released her own statement on Facebook, saying she did not believe the remains belonged to her sons, but that the family was awaiting official forensic confirmation. I want to sit with what that moment felt like. For approximately 48 hours, the world thought that 3 little boys who disappeared in pajamas the night after Thanksgiving 2010 had finally been found. Tanya Zouvers, who has waited 15 years for an answer, had 48 hours of something that might have been the beginning of the end of not knowing. And then it wasn't. 3 children in Memphis are still unidentified. Their families, whoever they are still looking for them. That is its own tragedy, and one that deserves its own reckoning. But Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton are still missing, and the only person who knows where they are will be sitting in a courtroom when this preliminary hearing begins. Let that sit for a moment. This is the part of the story that the headlines do not fully capture. John Skelton served a sentence for unlawful imprisonment, not murder, because in 2011, the legal system could not build a murder case without a body, and so it charged what it could prove. That is not a failure of individual prosecutors. It is a structural limitation of the system as designed. The burden of proof exists because it must. That is not the failure. The failure is the 14 years between the plea and the murder charge. For 14 years, John Skelton sat inside the prison system holding information about the location of 3 children's remains. And for 14 years, the law had no mechanism that could compel him to disclose it. He could generate story after story. He could send investigators across 3 states. He could name a reality television personality and watch police drive to meet him. And the system, bound by its own rules, could only wait for the clock to run down. Some states have enacted statutes specifically designed for this situation. Laws that allow prosecutors to offer sentence reductions in exchange for disclosed remains locations in no-body homicide cases. Michigan did not deploy such a mechanism.
The result: 3 children are somewhere. Their mother cannot bury them. She cannot hold a funeral. She cannot stand at a graveside and have the physical, concrete act of grief that human beings require to move through the loss of someone they love. She has a legal declaration of death. She has a murder charge. She has a preliminary hearing. And she has a man who has known the answer every single morning for 15 years and has chosen, with what appears to be extraordinary deliberateness, not to give it to her. The legal system failed to prevent that choice. It has now decided, 15 years later, to put that choice on trial. Whether the trial delivers a verdict, whether the verdict delivers a location, whether the location delivers what Tanya has waited 15 years to receive. Those are questions that no one can answer yet. But for the first time since November 26, 2010, the answer is no longer entirely in John Skelton's hands. Andrew Ryan Skelton was 9 years old. He wore brown pajamas with orange trim. He was smart as a whip and had never met a video game he could not beat. Alexander William Skelton was 7. He wore glasses. He needed the world a little clearer than it appeared. He was inquisitive and loved tinkering, and by every account that survives him, was already a pint-sized character with a personality larger than his age. Tanner Lucas Skelton was 5. He had strawberry blonde hair and blue eyes, and he wore a Scooby-Doo shirt because he was 5. And that is what you wear when you are 5 and the world has not yet given you a reason to wear anything else. He had just started school, big school, like his brothers. They went to their father's house for Thanksgiving. They did not come home. A courtroom will begin to decide what that means under the law. But what it means as a human truth, that a father ended the lives of 3 little boys and spent 15 years making their mother carry the weight of not knowing, that does not require a verdict. We already know what that is. We cannot give Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner the Thanksgiving they deserved. We cannot give Tanya the 15 years that were taken from her, but we can say their names. We can make sure that anyone who knows anything, anyone who was ever told something, shown something, driven somewhere, knows that this case is not a footnote, that the world has not moved on, that we are still looking. If you have any information about the Skelton brothers, contact the Morenci Police Department at 517-458-7104 or Michigan State Police at 517-322-1907.
Their names were Andrew and Alexander and Tanner. Say them out loud.